So welcome to the youth protection presentation. I have with me our lovely past district governor, Kathy Suvia. She actually has a history of working with youth, working with abused individuals. Let's talk about that way, because it could be adults, it could be youth, but this is what uniquely qualifies her for this. Her passion for this has been amazing. She's been updating our youth protection portion of our district policies, and we have worked very closely together this year on making sure that the youth are protected, but more importantly, that the Rotarians understand the importance of the youth protection. So without any further ado, I'm going to start the presentation and away we go.
All right. Thank you, Paula. And I'll share with you a little bit more about my co-presenter, Paula, in a few minutes while she gets ready to pull up the slides. I want to start by just asking a question, because I think I know the answer to this question, but let's make sure. Do either of you have children or grandchildren? And I think the answer is yes, right? Yes. So when we in Rotary talk about youth protection and youth services, I'd like us to just think about how we would want those volunteers, those Rotarians and the other volunteers working with them to treat our children, if it were our children who were involved in those programs. There's a sign in a neighborhood that I drive by pretty often, and it says, some of you may have seen a sign like this. It says, "Drive like your kids live here." And you know, I like to think of myself as a pretty cautious driver, but every time I see that sign, I tend to just slow down and pay a little bit closer attention. So that's what this youth protection policy is all about for us. We know that we're safe. We know that we care about our kids and everyone who works with our youth. But this is a reminder for us to be extra careful when we do that. So go ahead, Paula, you can advance.
Did you see it?
It didn't advance.
It didn't advance. Okay. So then we're going to go
like this. There it is. We'll have to make it a little bit bigger, I think, though, for people. There we go. Yeah. That's good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joan, Ramon, can you see that? And welcome, Tracy. Glad to have you with us. So statement of conduct, and I promise that I will not read these slides to you, but this one I think is especially important. District 5160, that's all of us, strives to create and maintain a safe environment for all the youth who participate in Rotary activities. To the best of their ability, Rotarians, Rotarian spouses and partners, and other volunteers must safeguard the children and the young people they come into contact with and protect them from physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. So remember, we're going to drive like our children live there. All right, Paula, go ahead. There's a few definitions that are pretty important to set the stage as we talk about youth protection. First of all, volunteers. Rotary volunteers include club and district youth protection officers, youth program officers, and committee members, Rotary members and non-members, members and non-members and their spouses and partners who work with students during activities or outings, or who transport students to event. Participants are anyone who participates in a youth activity. So when you and I work in youth services, when we go to activities with our youth, we are youth program participants. Go ahead, Paula. A couple more definitions. Basically, we determine the need for youth protection certification based on the type of contact that a volunteer has with youth. And the two basic types of contact are casual or continued. I should say too, before I go any further, that all of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you comes directly from the most recently approved district policy manual, which includes a whole section on youth protection policies. So what I'm sharing with you is in that manual. And to take it even further, most of that came directly from the guidelines and the regulations from Rotary International, who protect all of us in this. So
We lose it?
can you hear me?
Do you still see it?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah, thank you. You can go ahead now. All right. So let's define those types of contact a little bit further. Go ahead. All right. Casual contact. People who have casual contact, which is incidental or infrequent, are persons not directly responsible for the youth, but who may provide incidental transportation or invite a youth to an event, such as a dinner, a movie, a sports event, a weekend activity, or travel provided by the Rotary or the program providing that service. Once again, casual contact, and this is key, casual contact must be infrequent and incidental so that a regular pattern is not established, and casual contact must take place in a group setting with reasonably foreseeable with risk of one-on-one contact. So persons who have casual contact, our members and our volunteers who have casual contact with youth, are not required to have youth protection certification. I'll just say, I think it's a good idea for anyone involved in youth programs, but it is not required for people who have casual contact. And again, the key components about casual contact are that it is infrequent, irregular, and always in a group setting. So those are really key components, definitions to that. Go ahead, Paula. All right, continued contact. So members who have continued contact do need to have youth protection certification. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a couple of minutes. But continued contact are persons having continued contact, overnight contact, or unsupervised contact. People who are Interact advisors, Interact chairs for various club, camp counselors, host families, people assigned to transport students on a regular basis. For instance, if you have Interact students who come to your meetings on a regular basis or come to your service projects on a regular basis, and the people transporting them are having continued and somewhat regular contact, they should be certified under the youth protection policy. Again, keys there are, there could be unsupervised or one-on-one contact. It's regular and it's unsupervised. All right. Any questions about those two types of contact? Because that, I think, is really the crux of the matter as to who needs to be certified and who doesn't. And you can just raise your hand, or we have a small group. Go ahead and speak up.
I have a question. This is Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for putting this on. We really appreciate it. I was trying to, and thank you, because I'm trying to understand this. This is key for us. I was trying to read the policy itself, and it looked like if a Rotarian did a one-time transfer within 150 miles, it did not need to be a group setting. Can you tell me if that is correct or incorrect?
If it's a one-time unplanned, all of a sudden, here's a youth who needs to be transported, it would not be required, but typically that kind of a situation is planned, so that person would need to be certified. And normally the people that are transported that far are in the youth exchange program, and they have, I guess, another overlay of rules that we're probably not going to get into tonight. So remember, back to casual contact, people who don't need to have youth protection certification are the people who are always in a group setting. So transporting a youth would require youth protection certification. Does that make sense?
Yes. And one more question.
Sure.
Same thing, casual contact. When you say group setting, if it's a husband, wife, spouse taking a youth to these kids have these ridiculous long lists of stuff they want to do. So if it's a husband and wife team taking the student, does that count as quote unquote group? What is the definition of group setting?
You know, Paula's
Actually, I'm
going
going
to
to talk
explain.
more about that.
Yeah, Paula will explain that a little bit further later on, but in most cases that would not be categorized as a group setting. So are we talking about a youth exchange student?
Oh yeah, these youth exchange students at our club make these ridiculously long lists and we try and satisfy them every year. And we've got a couple of Rotarians that seem to do the same thing every year. One is
Yeah.
a gentleman, he has a 2-seater plane. He takes the youth up in a plane one time, but that sounds like that might no longer be appropriate unless he's certified. The other one likes to go skiing. She loves to take kids skiing, but it's probably her and her spouse. So we're just trying to get to what we actually do so we can understand it a little better.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're here this evening and you're going to have some good questions. And like I say, the majority of this training is going to apply to the other types of youth activities that we do in Rotary, not youth exchange. Youth exchange because of the need to have one-on-one relationships with these youth, overnight, extended travel. There's kind of a different criteria that's applied to them. So keep that in mind, and we'll see if we can answer your questions later on when Paula talks a little bit more about that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking your questions. Joan or Ramon, do either of you have questions about that?
No, we are
I-
definitely casual, so I don't
Okay.
have a lot of details.
Yeah, we did have a lot of conversation last year about who needs to be certified, and that definition of casual versus continued really helped to clarify it for everyone. Another question that comes up often, and Paula may address this as well, and I know she is much more conversant in this topic, but I'll just touch on it. We sometimes have Rotarians who, because of their jobs, have gone through a background check. They may be teachers or law enforcement officers or something like that. And they say, I don't have to do that because I'm already certified through this other organization. Here's the defining decision. If you are functioning as a professional in your job for this activity, then you don't need to have Rotary Youth Protection Certification. If you are functioning as a Rotary Youth Volunteer, then you do need to have Rotary's Youth Protection Certification. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
quite frankly, it's an insurance thing. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question. Again, I happen to work with some nonprofits in the back, and we had to be certified. Is there
Yeah.
a particular organization that this certification goes through that which might be the same that already have certification?
yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit more later too. You guys are asking great questions. This is a Rotary Youth Protection Certification, so it would not be the same certification that you'd had from any other nonprofit or school, or like I worked for a child abuse prevention council. I was certified there, but that doesn't carry over because the databases don't talk to each other, and the rules and the guidelines are sometimes a little bit different. So, hi, Jan, I see that you joined us. Welcome. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And we segued into this pretty easily here. Paula is going to go into this process quite a little bit more detail later on in this session, but here are really the basics in order to get the Youth Protection Certification for any volunteer. This is a Rotarian or a Rotarian spouse or a friend who works with you, works with your club, and works with your youth programs. They have to complete a volunteer application form. There's a criminal background check that's completed. They are interviewed. And I will say that the interviews are conducted by a small group of district leaders who have professional training and extended training on how to conduct an interview and what to look for in an interview. The interview questions are asked of every single person who goes through that process. It's the same set of questions that are asked to everyone. We ask the applicants to provide a list of references, 3 references, and those references are followed up with to determine a little bit more about your background, particularly working with youth. And then, of course, you comply with the Rotary International guidelines. So as I said, Paula's going to talk a little bit more in detail about that process. Go ahead and advance, Paula. So jumping a little bit forward, let's say you're working in your youth activity and someone comes to you and says, I'd like to file a complaint. I think this was wrong. I think that Joe Rotarian here was abusive to one of these children, or one of these youth members, or perhaps it was a youth being abusive or harassing one of the other youth. So again, this comes from the guidelines that we have. Any allegation of abuse or harassment must be taken seriously. So you always want to listen to that, take it seriously, regardless of the circumstances and or the timing. There's 2 things that you as a club leader need to be aware of. Remove the suspected persons, and if it's a youth, remove the youth from any contact with youth program participants. So that is the first thing that needs to happen. And then report that incident to your governor. So that would be, in this case, Governor Suzanne. Suzanne has a pretty extensive list of requirements that she needs to follow. The guidelines are very, very clear. She needs to contact the Rotary International Youth Protection Officer, and you should, or she will, if you hadn't, report it to the Youth Protection Officer, who will conduct a thorough investigation. In our case, in our district, our Youth Protection Officer is none other than my co-presenter, Paula McEvoy. So this is a great segue for me to more formally introduce Paula to you. Paula is a past president of the Rotary Club of Delta in Antioch. She's currently Youth Protection Officer for District 5160. Paula is a retired educator. She spent the first 16 years of her career, she says, as a classroom teacher, and then another 15 years as a school administrator. As an administrator, Paula spent several hours a day investigating situations that occurred at schools, and I bet you we could imagine many situations that might occur there. Paula says that you could really refer to her as the cop for the school, and that involved her working with local law enforcement as well as doing investigations. She worked with the county educational offices and local law enforcement. Her job was really to enforce the state education code with students, with parents, with teachers, and community members. And as our district youth protection officer, her job is to conduct investigations and to enforce our Rotary code of conduct for working with youth. So at this point, I will hand the microphone over to my co-presenter, Paula. I'll be watching in the chat. If you have questions, go ahead and place them in there in case we don't see you ask. And we'll have a lot more discussion later on. All right, Paula.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I really do appreciate that. So while Kathy was kind of doing the overview of things and she touched on some things that we are going to repeat, I'm just going to tell you there will be some repeat, which is okay, because we want to impose upon you and impress upon you the importance of the things that we do. So she talked about kind of why we do it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we do it, because doing this properly, or at least making sure we have the CYA in place, is what really makes youth protection very valid. Okay. So I'm going to have to move some things around because I do have graphics that will not perform because I'm not able to put it into that kind of a mode. All right. So we're going to be talking about the protection. So what is it? We're talking about protecting youth. We're talking about protecting our volunteers. We're talking about protecting yourself, and we're talking about protecting Rotary, because these are the main characters in our situations. All right. So when we're doing this, we want to make sure we have a positive environment. We're going to use what we call the 2 deep practice. Tracy, you alluded to it, that you and your husband are taking a child somewhere. That's too deep practice, and I'll go more into it. Knowing what to look for. Screening process, which Kathy started to talk about, but the most important thing that people seem to forget about is the whole common sense. For example, you may have a Rotarian in your club that kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies or gives you this kind of, and you have to listen to that because there is something there. You may not know what it is, but there's something there. Same thing with the students. You may get this sense of, well, that was a weird thing to say, or, that was odd. Be very cognizant of it. That is your common sense talking to you, okay? So creating the positive environment is about making sure before the event happens that everyone understands the expectations. So you could have a volunteer slip that people sign depending on what the event is. You could have just something that, you present to your Rotary members that are participating and present to the interactors that might be engaging and even their friends. Make sure that there is some sort of discussion about the training and evaluate and execute these expectations. It's very important that things are positive. So, we talk about the good team. Yay, we can do this, right? And then make sure you have supports set up in place. And those are things you're going to take care of in advance. For example, University of California at Berkeley does a big Interact weekend. And the first time that they met with me about youth protection, I started talking about all of these supports that they need to have in place. And all they said to me is, wow, we don't have any of that. We must have just been lucky. And I said, sounds like it. So let's make sure we have things in place. All right. So again, during the event, you're managing the too deep practice. I'm going to go into that more. When you're in there, whoever's running the event and whatever Rotarians or adults are in charge of the event, they need to be encouraging everyone to use positive behavior. So that means we're avoiding those dirty jokes that some people like to tell, or the innuendos, or even just the use of vulgar language. We want to make sure that that is all kibosh, right? We also want to make sure that it's fun, because then we want to encourage more Rotarians to come out. We want to encourage more students to come out because there are future Rotarians. And of course, if something happens, it might just be that somebody made a crass joke that they thought was out of earshot of a kid. You just go, hey, remember, man, we're trying to keep things upbeat. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Because you front loaded this. And that's the key. You front loaded. So you told them before, you told them when it happened, and you reminded them afterwards. So you got to stay on top of it. So after the event, if there was something offensive that happened, you need to make sure this is where the supports come into play. So for example, if something had happened to an interactor when they were at Cal, they had to have somebody who was non-Rotarian available. Depending on the situation, how far do we need to go? In that situation, it's a weekend. So I encourage them to have the psych department, school psychologist, non-Rotarian though, that was important, but also that Berkeley Rotary supports that program. So encouraging them to have at least 3 Rotarians that are on call that weekend, because if a kid gets sick or hurt and can't participate, they don't want to stop the program. Someone has to then take care of that kid. And that's where the Berkeley Rotaractors can provide their support, or the Rotarians can support. Also, in the event of an offensive event, you see there, the offensive thing happens, you discuss the feelings, you encourage the discussion, you find a solution, and you make the resolution. What does that look like though? Okay, how do we actually do that? So it might just be that you go and talk to the kid. It might be you go and talk to the Rotarian that may have been offended by the kid. Because remember, these things can go both ways. In the course with the Rotaractors, the big thing that they understood suddenly was that this might be that kid's first time away from home. So you might be dealing with a challenging teenager who decides that, oh, well, my mom and dad aren't around, so I'm going to do what I want to do. I have to have supports in place for that, okay? If needed, have counselors. Make sure you involve the parents right away. That way, the parents can't say, well, I didn't know anything about it. Nobody told me. Yes, I told you, document, document, document. And of course, as Kathy said, reach out to 5160. If you're not the president, then you make sure you tell your president, and you and your president can tell the district governor, or you can make sure your president knows about it and tell the district governor. And chances are the district governor will be calling me because I'm going to be doing an investigation about it. All right, so here's the 2 deep practice. And Tracy, I'm so glad that you brought it up, because in a situation where you're going to be working with youth, you want to make sure that there is always present 3 people. And so you can do it with 2 adults or 1 minor, or you could do it with 2 minors and 1 adult. And when I talk about a minor, I'm talking about, a 14, 15, 16-year-old, because these people are old enough to know what they're doing and young enough, though, that they're considered minors. But they know what's going on. They can see when someone is doing something they should not be doing. So you always want to make sure that you have at least 2 people with you. If you're dropping off a student somewhere, for example, have another Rotarian in the car, or your kid in the car, if your kid is one of the participants. Because when you drop off that road interactor, you want to make sure that that interactor is the last one dropped off before you and your kid go home. Or make arrangements for another Rotarian to ride with you in the car. And then if you have to bring them back to their car, so be it. It's all right. It's really, the car's doing all the work anyway. So those are the kinds of things you want to be mindful of, excuse me. So that is what 2 deep practice is. 2 deep practice happens in a lot of different places. Okay, this is where I got to take this one out. Notice I like my common sense, don't I? Okay, so when traveling in the car, again, I already mentioned that one. Any type of close quarters. So if you're working in a garden behind a shed or something, or you're working in a small room where you're painting. Any secluded areas, we're out in the forest and we're gonna go pick some things or whatever. Communicating via social media. Okay. This one is very important. People forget that this is the primary way that kids communicate. And if you email a kid, make sure you CC another adult, or send the email to all of the kids if it's something that merits that. If a kid responds on their own and has a question, make sure you respond to 1 other adult who's a part of the program with you. Okay, it could be the president, it could be the youth protection officer of your club, it could be just the other Rotarian that's helping out. It doesn't really matter, but you make sure you always communicate with at least 1 other adult when you are responding to students' questions. All right, and whenever Rotarians and youth are together, just make sure we remember our 2A, 1M or 2M, 1A, right? 2 adults, 1 minor, 2 minors, 1 adult. Okay, all right. So we're going to get into some deep water here with this. A couple of things that you need to know about, and kids know about these things, especially high schoolers, because they start learning about sexual harassment, believe it or not, in middle school. We start teaching it to students because it happens to them. One of the big ones I'm going to tell you honestly is you get these boys who slap the girls on the bottom and they think it's funny. And it's not. It's actually sexual harassment or sexual abuse. But discriminatory harassment, that would be obviously any of the protected by ACLU, any of those protected categories would be discriminatory. Creating a hostile environment, yelling, profanity, anything like that. The power of trust is a key one. We're going to talk about that one too. And then there are the myths that surround it. So when you're looking at discriminatory harassment, there they are. These are all of the things that are protected by our civil liberties. These are all in there. And of course, these are things we all understand and know, because either we've been a part of it, we've seen it happen, and we don't like it. So we want to make sure that we continue to maintain that high standard of expectation. Zero tolerance is definitely one that the Rotary International has a zero tolerance for any sexual harassment. And remember, the difference between sexual harassment and sexual abuse is contact. That's the biggest difference. Sexual harassment would be things of a sexual nature, whether it's saying things, whether it's doing things. And notice that sexual harassment is really more of a civil violation, whereas sexual abuse is a criminal act. It's a touching, it's a hitting, it's a Well, I don't need to go into more detail about that. Things to watch for. You might see this happening. Now, it might be kid on kid where they're flirting, and hopefully that's what it is, and it's not an adult kid flirting, but those flirtations, you need to nip them in the bud. Any type of touching, and I mean, I know that as an administrator, kids would come up and hug me, and I had to be very careful. I would do these kind of sideways hug, you know, so that the kid wasn't up against my chest. It could be graffiti or pictures, it could be gestures, and even flipping the bird is considered sexual harassment, believe it or not. And of course, we know about any inappropriate statements, and then body language. This is the one where you're kind of going, huh, this is the common sense one, is the body language, where you see someone kind of like, it's kind of that, what are you doing? And it's weird to you, address it, okay? Nip it in the bud. All right, these are just other versions that are definitely more, this is when you're like online, that kind of thing. So voyeurism, indecent exposures, right? This is all included. Hopefully you never have to deal with this, but these are also pieces that would fall under the sexual harassment, sexual abuse portion. All right, so the power of trust is the power that we have as Rotarians. I mean, it's interesting because we all know the four-way test, so we automatically trust another Rotarian. If we're going to do business with, let's say we're going to do business with an auto place, okay, I got to take my car and I know that guy's a Rotarian and that guy's not, I'm probably going to go to the Rotarian because he understands the four-way test. That's power. That's something that is very important to us as Rotarians, and we value it because we try to live that four-way test. Well, it's no different with kids, and we find that oftentimes the person that is most apt to be the perpetrator is actually someone that the youth will know, and vice versa, okay? Where they build this relationship, or what is the word? Someone used it with me and said, well, we can't really use that word anymore. Grooming, that's the word. So grooming comes into play here. And when we start looking at this in terms of grooming, I mean, look at who these people are, and you see how they kind of groom them to accept the next level until they've broken them down completely. And there you go. All right. Know the myth. This is very important. Just because a person says to you, I didn't mean it, doesn't mean anything. It never has meant anything. I didn't mean to offend them. But if you know that the behavior is offensive, or if you're not sure and you ask yourself, well, could that be offensive? Well, yeah. Then if it's offensive, then you did mean it, even though you didn't think you did. It's that same thing, you know, when someone tells, you know, I've been called some things as a principal, and then they go, oh, I'm just kidding. Really? You sure about that? Because, you know, just because you add the just kidding doesn't mean you didn't mean it, right? So those are all parts of that myth. All right, so, and Kathy alluded to this as well. So when all else goes wrong, okay, what do we do? Okay, we have got to investigate it right away. I like to use the terminology laws, listen, assure privacy, write it down, and stick to the facts. It's very hard sometimes to wade through the investigation when you're trying to stick to an objective and you're trying to be objective. And it's hard to, because everything is subjective based, and it's all subjective because it's all subject to the victim. It really comes from the perspective of the victim. It's not the person doing it, it's the receiver of it. That's what defines whether or not this is any type of harassment or offensive situation. It's the receiver. That is what is written in law. And so wading through their emotions, because there should be some emotions, is very difficult. So sticking to the facts is important. Write it down. And yes, you can write down their emotional response because it is part of the experience that they had, and it kind of denotes and relates to the facts that they are emotional, that they're crying, they're very upset. And we're going to talk a little bit about this assuring privacy, because it will be private. You will do the interview privately with another adult present, because remember, we have the 2A, 1M in this scenario. But listen carefully to what they're saying. Try not to open it's very hard to do, because you hear this traumatic story sometimes, and you really have to kind of keep the poker face going when you're doing this. But then make sure that the minor, if that's who the victim is, or if it's a Rotarian, if that's who the victim is, make sure that they are protected, make sure that they are safe, assure them that something will be done, because something has to be done. All right. If you recognize that this fell under one of the categories of sexual abuse, then you need to contact the authorities immediately. You contact them before you contact Suzanne, actually.
Oh.
Because once you have understood that a law has been broken, you must contact the police immediately. You can still tell Suzanne, and you need to tell Suzanne, and I've called the police. Now, I'm going to tell you pointedly that there was an investigation I did, and when I shared my findings, our district governor reached out to law enforcement to determine if it was a law enforcement requirement, and they said no. So we did our due diligence, and that's a very important thing to understand. We don't take it lightly. And of course, as it says, contact 5160. Okay. All right. So there's a difference between questioning someone and interrogating someone. When you question someone, it can sometimes get to an interrogation level, but an interrogation level is more about there's some lying going on, and you're determining there's some lying going on. Questioning is you're trying to understand more of the situation. You're trying to understand the details, which can also feel like interrogating them. So that's where that calmness comes in. In regards to privacy versus confidentiality, yes, you will keep the interview private in that you will only share it with those that need to know. But confidentiality means that you don't tell anybody about it. And I'm sorry, that can't happen. Someone has to be told. And so they need to understand, yes, I will be contacting the district governor. I'll be letting our Rotary president know. I will be letting your parent know. They have to know that, but I would not tell them that until you're done. Because if you tell them that they're going to contact the parent, they may not say anything to you. They may not tell you anything, and you need to understand what's going on. Or now you've done the interview and you say, okay, well, I'm going to let your parents know what's going on. And then they start saying, oh, no, don't call my mom. Well, now we got to get back to the question interrogation, because that's a telltale sign sometimes that maybe they were just lying. I don't know. Facts versus opinions, I think that's pretty straightforward. I've had people say to me, well, I don't like this person. I don't think they should be doing this. And I say, okay, well, what evidence do you have to support that? Well, I heard from this person that person said this person thing about that person. Okay, so I need to go find the horse in this, because I need to know what the story is. I have to get to the facts, right? What was that show? Just the facts, ma'am, right? So that's what we want to stick to. All right. Okay. So if you're not sure about anything else, just remember the 2A1M, right? Using common sense, believe it or not, it has served me well. Laws, so listen, assure privacy, write it down. What was S again? Write it down. Wait, I actually forgot what S is. What is S again? Anybody see it? Oh, there it is. Stick to the facts. Sorry, I forgot. Because I don't write it down for myself. Otherwise, it doesn't.
Sorry, Paul, I was trying to unmute and couldn't get to you. Okay.
Okay. And stick to the facts. All right. So everybody, and those things will serve you well. And then, of course, always contact 5160. So when it comes time to start the screening process for your members, you're going to go to Rotary5160.org, and there is a youth. You'll see the drop down for youth, and it'll say youth protection programs. When you actually scroll down to the youth protection programs, there is a learn more button there for you. This will begin the process, because you will log in as yourself. It's going to automatically generate the starting process for you. And that will go to Lynette, and Lynette will handle it very well. And as Kathy said, we do interview as a part of it. And we have training in the interview. Part of the training comes from just our history, but then also just continuing to do this. So we like to do, if you can't do the interview in person, we do like to do a Zoom call. And the reason we like to do the Zoom call is because it's very important to see the expression on the person's face. Because I bet money, Kathy is a human lie detector. I mean, after working with abused people, you kind of figure out what real looks like. So this will start the process. And then, as Kathy had mentioned already, it goes into our youth protection program. We have a database for every Rotarian in 5160, and it doesn't talk to the California Teachers Association. It doesn't talk to California law enforcement agencies. It doesn't talk to the counties of anybody. They don't talk to each other because one, it is actually illegal to do that. So we have to keep our own database. But then that way, if someone comes to me and says, hey, you know what, I'm worried about this Rotarian, have they done the training? And we go in, because let me tell you, when something happens, the first thing we're going to look at is, did the person go through the youth protection training? That's the first thing we're going to look at. And if they didn't go through the youth protection training and they were dealing with youth and the club allowed it, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you're going to purchase a background check, and that can, I can't remember. I think it's $16. And then you'll have your application, your training, and your interview questions. And remember that Rotary.org and Rotary 5160, we want to support everything that you're doing. We want to make sure that you as the Rotarians and your voluntarians are all safe. We also want to make sure that the youth can have a positive experience. Because if we can do that, we're golden. Okay. Questions. Can I turn the slide down now? I can stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I want to just get this out of my way.
There, now we can see our faces.
Yes, now I can see you all. All right.
Yeah.
So, Tracy, did I answer that question though about you and your husband and you're traveling together?
Not exactly, not just because we
Okay.
are on record. It's not me and my husband that's going. It was Rotarian that asked me about the youth exchange. They like to take the kids to do stuff. So I still have, I think, the same question because I wasn't clear. Are husband and wife combo count as the 2 deep or not?
Yes, they do count as 2D.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, they do.
What was the thing? I'm sorry, I'm tagging the second part of my question. What was the thing in the policy manual about 150 miles? So if one of our couples from the Rotary Club, one's Rotarian, maybe one's not, want to take the youth somewhere, it's in excess of 150 miles, but it's a one-time plan thing. That's still okay, even though they're not certified?
So one of them has to be certified.
Because why? I just want to understand it for
Okay.
information.
Okay, so if one of them is a Rotarian,
Mhm.
which obviously they must be because they're hosting
Yeah.
youth exchange. So if one of them is a Rotarian, then that Rotarian should have already gone through all of the youth exchange training in order to have the student. But this practices here, they're still the ones that need to be in place when they do anything with that youth.
So I think that, and I'm sorry to keep going on this, but we got a lot of folks that are asking similar questions. These are not the folks that house the student. These are just Rotarians jumping in to kill their wish list items. So
then they need to be certified. The
Even if it's
Rotarian
one
has to at least be certified. And then if they're going to bring like their spouse with them, they're covered. Because they will have the 2 adults with the 1 minor.
So anytime you take 1 minor, 2 adults, you have to have one of them be a certified, so you can't have helpers?
Yeah, you need to have whoever that Rotarian is that's going to be, that's the club member that's helping out. They need to be certified in youth protection in order to transport even a one-time event.
Thank you for clarifying that. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks for asking your question, Tracy, and allowing us to get into it a little further, because Paula and I both want to be sure you understand this and understand the reasons for it. It really is to protect all of us. So
Yeah.
It actually protects the Rotarians and the Rotarian spouses more than anything else.
Totally
Because-
get it.
Yeah,
We just want to make sure we're interpreting it correctly because we got a lot of questions after we sent the policy out just to the board. I haven't even told the club about it.
and Tracy, I would just add, particularly with youth exchange students, really your best source of information is to talk to the youth exchange counselor who you've been working with for the student, because they've worked out a whole bunch of scenarios, because we travel with our youth exchange students. So they more than likely have dealt with the situation that you're anticipating and can give you either the definitive, yes, this is what needs to happen, or if you do it this way, perhaps there's another Rotarian who is certified who could go with you, or they may be able to give you some options to work around that. So I would really encourage you to follow up with them as well. And that youth exchange team are very, very conversant in all the rules. So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
go ahead,
Jan,
Joan.
did you have a question? Oh, Joan,
Well,
go
Joan
ahead.
did.
I did. Is this, am I correct that this is a change from several years ago? Like in 2015, 2016, we used to house interactors when they came up for the Rotaract weekend. And we had to make sure that we were certified. But the certification then was something, it was an exam that we took online. There was certainly no interview involved. Now, if we were doing that, which is, it's a one-time thing where we have 20 kids staying in our house and there are 2 of us, would we have to be certified?
If
Yes.
there was not another Rotarian who was certified with them.
I see.
Yes,
So somebody has to be.
yes.
If there was one other adult in the house at the time, like one of their chaperones who was certified, then we would not have to do it ourselves.
Correct.
That would be my understanding. Yeah.
That's-
And Joan, just to further explain your question, you said, are you correct that this is a change? Yes. And that's why the new district policy manual has a whole section on youth protection policy, because we wanted to clarify the rule. And the majority of this new ruling, this new guideline that we've packaged, has come from Rotary International. And quite frankly, it's based on society today and the
Right.
fact that there is much more danger for youth and adults in these kinds of situations. So we want to protect everyone. So yes, it has changed.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
So-
I mean, I think it's fine to make it
Yeah.
harder, but I just want to get it clear.
Yeah.
So for
You're-
example, Joan, if you and Fred are hosting 10 Rotaractors or Interactors, as long as you're certified, Fred doesn't have to be certified.
Right.
I mean, he's a
get that.
past district governor too, and he's like one of those rare Rotarians that we're not really worried about. But
No, I
even
understand.
with that in mind,
Yeah.
yeah,
But Rotaractors, however, are a different matter.
Yes.
Rotaractors are adults now.
Yeah.
Yes.
they are adults. Okay, so what were you doing when you were 19?
Yeah, I
That's-
know.
Yeah.
Yes, they're adults, but I would still use the same practices with them, because remember, the frontal cortex is not fully
Right.
developed until you're about 25 or 26.
Right. Right. We're
So-
very careful. If we mentor them, we meet in a coffee shop in public
Yeah,
and
there
stuff
you
like
go.
that.
There
But,
you go.
Good thinking. All right.
Because our club does not have an Interact club, or at least a very viable Interact club. And so we really do not need and we don't have any youth exchange. So I just needed to get a few details straight about this. If the Interact club became more active, obviously then we would need more people to be certified.
Well, I know
Or
the
if
teacher
you,
at Free High, who is a previous Rotaractor. Maybe
Oh,
she
I
could get-
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
get
targeted
it going for Berkeley.
poor Lauren. She's being, people want her to do everything having to do with youth.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to mentor her just as being a teacher. So
Great.
yeah, she's a great kid. But, okay, Jan, did you have a question?
No, I think it sounds like Tracy answered my question or asked my question. I was busy typing and trying to send a message to Kathy, but I can't figure out how to send it to you. You haven't gotten it, have you? It's in the
I
chat.
haven't gotten it. No.
Okay, there appears to be no way to actually send this message to you. So,
Down, if you open the chat, Jan,
yeah,
open the chat, do you see what that is? And click on the little button where it says everyone, and there's a down arrow. If you click on that button,
okay.
my name should pop up there.
Yes, it did, and I
All right.
addressed it to you.
And you could send me a message there.
Yeah,
And then
that's
hit return and it'll go.
it always used to work. But
I
there's
just got a test from
there's like
Tracy.
no send or yeah, there doesn't seem to be an option to do that.
I had to hit the enter button to make it go. There's no little clicky.
Is that what it is, Tracy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Jan, if it's okay, I did have a second question for the team that I wasn't sure if you were going to ask or not. So if I may, I'll ask it. It has to do with the spelling bee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's-
Just again, going back to what is a group. So if we've got like 3 judges, but a room full, like 200, 300 students and their parents, do those 3 judges from Rotary and not Rotary, do they have to be certified under this quote unquote group situation? Does one?
No, because that's a school event. And there should be a teacher running the spelling bee, correct?
No.
No.
So this is sponsored by Rotary
Yes.
and their parents are present?
Yes.
Some of them.
Then
Yes.
If their parents are present, here's the thing, in an event like that where it's kind of a, there's no, are the Rotarians going to be transporting any of the kids to and from the event?
No.
Are the Rotarians going to be in any type of private quarters with the students at any time?
No.
Then that would be one of those exceptions to the youth protection, because the kids are all on stage and you're running the spelling bee. And even though it's sponsored by Rotary and hosted by Rotary, the parents are there and they're not driving them anywhere. They fine. That would be an event. That would be an exception. Spelling bee, geography bee, musical event, right? Those kinds of things where the parents are dropping off and picking up, and there's so many people present, that would be one of those events that, no, you'd be okay.
I
It's
don't want
when
to.
you're
Oh, I'm sorry.
in tight quarters and things like
Sure.
that.
And I don't want to take your time in case everybody has questions. I have 2 other examples, so maybe I'll just email you separately if that's okay.
Yeah, and then Ramon, did you have any questions? Because we weren't able to get to Ramon. I want to make sure to get to him. He's frozen. Okay, Tracy, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Following that, then when we have students being mentored or youth being mentored, the mentor should be certified no matter what, if I'm understanding it correctly, because it'll be
Yes.
one-on-one. And then
Yep.
finally, in our scholarship review program, we have a bunch of volunteer judges that are Rotarians each year. But since they are interviewing the youth, at least it sounds like at least one person needs to be certified in that interview group, and it should be a group of 3, never a group of 2.
Correct.
Tracy, FYI, I believe that they're handling those via Zoom. At least they did the year that I was on the interview panel, which was year before last.
That's a really great point. Paula, does that change anything if it's electronic?
Nope, it doesn't. Actually, remember social media. Remember, I was saying that even if you're looking at social media, if you're sending emails or any social media, make sure you have at least one other adult present or on the communication.
That includes Zoom,
No.
a Zoom conference.
Right? Zoom, you should have
Okay.
at least one other adult with you.
It includes Zoom, it includes emails, it includes text messages, Instagram, anything like that should never be private between one adult and one youth.
Even like Messenger on Facebook,
Right.
always include another adult on the message.
To clarify, one of those adults needs to be certified.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Ramon, now you're back with us. Did you have a question?
No, not really. I guess the only thing, again, you folks are doing all kinds of stuff. And I think for me, the big thing was transporting youth to some of, to go on a project with this or, a field trip or something like that. But I think you answered it. I have no questions other than that. Because that's really what our stage in life is right now, is just taking young people to festivities or projects or that kind of stuff. And so you answered the question for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So whenever it's going to be where the group is, if the group of youth are showing up on their own, right, and it's in a very public kind of situation, like a spelling bee, geography bee, that kind of thing, as long as, I mean, everybody should go through the training anyway, and it's good for 3 years. So if somebody did the training last year, they're still good for the next 2 years. So even if you have a rotation of Rotarians, that would be a cluster of Rotarians, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a rotation of Rotarians and you just keep going through and everybody keeps doing their certification, you will always have certified Rotarians around the youth. That's an important piece. But if it's anytime there's going to be communications, transportations, moving kids place to place, I mean, we do like Rotary Home Team. That's one of our things. And I bring the youth from the schools, especially the ones that are up for expulsion. They seem to really enjoy doing the Rotary Home Team. So I made it community service hours for the kids that are up for expulsion. And then they don't get expelled because they have an appreciation for life. So just remember the value of it. But I'm certified, so they come with me, and I have 3 kids, sometimes 2 kids. But if I'm only going to have 1 kid that day, I have another Rotarian with me.
Makes sense. I think you guys have, all of you Rotarians, ladies and gentlemen, have had some great questions, and thank you for your patience with Paula and I. Thanks for your attention, your interest, your wanting to do the right thing. And before I close and turn it back over to Paula, I just want to say that we have an excellent resource in our district with Paula as our youth protection officer. And if you would like her to come to your club and do this program or a version of this program about how members should function when they're working with the youth in your community, then I think Paula, I'm jumping out, Paula, and offering you, I believe Paula is available to do that, and she can either do that live depending on what works for you, or she can do that via Zoom. And I just think it would be wonderful if all of the Rotarians in our district had this basic training about youth protection. So again, I want to thank you all for being here. And Paula, I will turn it back to you to close for any final comments. So
I love the fact that Kathy has taken this on this last year during her governorship, because it is something that all of us value. We all want to make sure that we're continuing to build Rotary, and we do it through our youth. So thank you so much for your service, and thank you so much for helping the youth of your community, because it will make a difference in their lives long before you know it. So thank you for that. And of course, you're welcome to email me. You're welcome to email Kathy with any questions, follow-ups, things like that, because questions come up, situations come up. If you're not sure, even if you know you have a program coming up with youth, hey, reach out. I'll be happy to go through and walk through what you can do to make sure that that this is safe. I mean, I took 150 kids to Washington, D.C. Never lost a one. So if I can take 150 kids to Washington, D.C. and they all come back, all 10 toes, all 10 fingers. Maybe a missing kidney, but I don't know. Only 1 kid had to have their appendix removed.
But did you have all of your toes and fingers? That's what we wanted.
I did. I had all my toes and fingers. I had a small bald spot right about here. So, but I'd be happy to, to talk you through it, walk you through it, whatever you need to do. That's what I'm here for.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good week. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you guys. Kathy, stay on.
All right.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
Tracy.
Thank you.
Bye, Jen. Bye, Ramon.
Bye.